or at least a host. And it's really wonderful to continue our celebrations of the 50th anniversary of the medical school with the very first of our speaker series. And we thought that it would be very appropriate that we start by gathering together our previous and current deans to really talk about the impact that the medical school has had on our community, on our province, and really the what we see as challenges as we move forward, but to really take an opportunity to look back to the early days of the medical school as well. And so it gives me great privilege to have these three deans here this evening. And I'm very happy to say that I know all of them quite well, and they've all had a very significant impact on many of us here within the faculty, myself included. And so how the evening is going to unfold is we're going to spend about an hour here. I just want to let you know that this is being recorded. We're actually being live streamed, and we're going to be on YouTube and all sorts of exciting things. So if you do ask questions, please know that that will be available for millions of people to view right after the event is done. When we're finished, we'd like you to gather with us in the foyer for a little reception and have an opportunity to chat with the deans as well. And I'm going to spend about 15 minutes asking specific questions, and then we'll leave some time at the end. When it's time to ask questions at the end, I'm going to ask you to come down to the microphone. I was going to say microphone, and so that everybody can hear you, and then it will be recorded as well. So welcome. So I'm going to start this evening by chatting first with Dr. Ian Bomer. And Dr. Bomer was the dean here of the Faculty of Medicine from 1996 to 2003, and I was just realizing was actually the dean that hired me. But prior to that, he was the chair of medicine, and he was a postgrad dean. And we used to have fireside chats with the dean. So this was, this brought back a lot of memories when we decided to do this evening. And Dr. Bomer actually joined as a faculty member in 1975, just a couple of years ago. And so I'm going to start by asking you to take us back to those early days of the medical school, if you will, and just tell us what the atmosphere was like. What was the sort of sense of the dreams and aspirations of the faculty and the students back then?
Thanks, Karen. It's lovely to be back and see some people who are actually going to keep me honest in my stories, right? So in 1975, I always thought of ourselves as the third wave of faculty. And by that I mean that there were the founders in the late 60s, Brian Payton and Bill Marshall and Ken Roberts and of course Ian Rusted. And then there was the second wave, which were really the senior faculty that were recruited. Some of them thanks to the FLQ, because they were from McGill, John Martin and Henry Galt, and for two of them. And they were actually my mentors as I was going through my studies at McGill. So it was, in a way, coming back. And there were a couple of us, David Churchill and myself, who were actually in the same class. And we were the young Turks. And we viewed the other people as, of course, old Turks. Well, turkeys, actually. Who would have thought that I would become one. Anyway, and I came for 2 years. And the idea was that I was going to test out Newfoundland because we had some family here. It was a good place to start. They offered me good money and a lab. And that happened to most of us coming in at that time. And 2 years was what my former chair at McGill had said, you have to stay there. And then if you don't like it, you can come back. When I got here, it was absolutely fantastic. I didn't even think I was going to stay 30 years, but everything that we started to do, we had support in order to actually do it. So when I was asked to do a microbiology course, I said to the dean at the time, I wasn't I wasn't capable of doing that, he sent me off for a course on how to develop a course. And that's the way it worked in the 70s. People were brought in to teach us how to teach. People were brought in, we were sent away. And also, we were given a fair amount of travel to be sure that we could maintain our scholarly work as well. So the whole idea was really one of great optimism and a lot of support. Of course, it was Al Cox who actually recruited me when he was chair of medicine. And when I came, he was not the chair of medicine anymore. He was the dean. And Wallace Ingram was the chair of medicine. So it gives you a sense of who were our mentors in both the clinical and the science areas.
And you've mentioned Dr. Cox and Dr. Rusted, and of course it was Dr. David Hawkins as well. And so you had the opportunity, as you say, Dr. Rusted had just finished his tenure as dean when you came, but of course he was still very active here. So just tell us a little bit about each of them.
So Ian Rusted blew me away because he would memorize all of this first year class from their photographs and know their names when they arrived. It was incredible talent. He also was extremely involved in the faculty. So even when he was vice president of health sciences, he used to come back regularly and check on us. And I have an unusual story because one day I went into one of my patients' rooms, and they said, "Oh, Dean Rusted has just been by to visit me." And I thought, oh my God, what is the Vice President of Health Sciences doing checking up on my patient? Right. Of course, Ian Rusted had a brother, Edward, who happened to be the Dean of the Anglican Cathedral. And it was actually the other Dean Rusted that had been to check up. So, but Ian maintained that relationship with the medical school all the way along. And of course, when he was retired, one of the jobs I had as dean was to try and persuade him to leave his archives with us, and we actually established the place that his archives. Oh, suddenly got his archives. Al was an amazing mentor to all of us. But one of the things that he told me when I first was appointed assistant dean postgraduate was that his job was actually, he had a whole bunch of monkeys on his back. And his job was, when I visited, keep phasing in and out. Is that normal? Okay. His job was to get rid of as many monkeys on his back as possible. And my role was to take them on and fix it. But I was much more generous with his time and mentorship as that. He was a smoker for most of his life and enjoyed a pipe and a cigarette. And he gave up smoking at least 100 times. And we were at a meeting in Ottawa one time with accreditation, and we had won our full accreditation for postgrad. And we went outside, and he kind of went, "Phew, I think I deserve a cigar." And we went for a walk with a cigar. The hawk, David Hawkins, well, he was kind of a wild man. I've known David since I was an intern in the Montreal General. In fact, he was my staff. He was the new staffman on the ward. Brilliant, remembered everything, was very annoying. He was, well, you know, you laugh, but, you know, he would catch you in the hall when you were on the way to the bathroom. And he would tell you something. And all you had in mind was, I need to get to the bathroom. And then about a month later, he would say, you know, when I was talking to you back a month ago, you know, did you do anything about that? And I'd forgotten entirely, of course, and he'd remind me. But he had a true photographic memory. And I was told by a psychologist many years ago that there's no such thing. But he could actually read a paper, and he could, if you told him 5 lines down from the right side of the page to the left, he could actually tell you what was there. It was really quite incredible. But I guess his time as dean was when he actually started to have the first year students over every year when they came into the medical school and at his place on Marine Drive. And those were great get-to-know-you parties. But he also had a habit when he had a party that when he wanted you to leave, he would turn on martial music and turn it up full blast on his large speakers. So you knew it was time that you got out of the house.
Yes, he was my dean, and I did go to one of those welcome to medical school parties and thought, this is pretty good. So I'm going to ask you next, just to sort of think back to the time when you were dean. What did you enjoy the most, and what do you think were the greatest challenges then?
So there's a lot of people in the room, Jane and the Brosnans and Gary, I see Laura back there, who probably heard my dean's speech. It was Jaap Toynman who was the search chair. We were in trouble in 94. The budget was, I think, around $18 million, which was about the same budget as we had in 1989. We had debt, and there had been some layoffs in the school. And when I gave my speech, someone asked me, I don't remember who, maybe Sharon Bueller, I think. Part of my speech was, I have a good relationship with government. We're going to try and get over this. And someone asked me, what are we going to do if we can't? And my brother had worked for Air Canada at the time, and they had taken a 10% pay cut. And I said, well, we have two choices. It's either laying off people who we don't want to lose, or we all take a pay cut. That went over like a lead balloon, but Jaap told me afterwards, he said, what were you doing? He said, you want the faculty behind you or not? I said, well, it's the reality of where we are. And, the beauty of it was that we were able to pull out of it. And it was due to a lot of people. We went into the clinical research really hard. We got good money. We were able to persuade the government. They had this EDGE program that was giving money to industries who had $1 million investment. We were able to get some money out of them. And we had a really powerful relationship between Joan Dorr, Bob Williams, who were two deputy ministers, Sister Elizabeth Davis. I mean, when you went up against that trio, there's nothing that couldn't be done. And, I now know, John Abbott is now the deputy minister, and I worked with John a lot. So he was actually with the Treasury Board at the time. And there's another great person who is, supportive of the medical school. But Jo Marie Aylward was actually the minister who drove through an incredible amount of change and is responsible for our Twillingate, Portobasque, Goose Bay. I see Michael up at the top there. Goose Bay programs and willing to take that risk. So it was a wonderful time to be here because we were able to grow. Probably the proudest area was our growth in research and our graduate student population, because we really grew the graduate student population. And we went through a very difficult curriculum change, and thanks to Alan Goodridge and Tom Scott, we got through that. So there's a lot of people who actually pulled together at the time.
Those things sound pretty familiar, don't they? Yeah. All right, great, thank you. So I'm going to get you to pass the talking stick to your esteemed colleague. So another, as Dr. Rourke told me last week, he calls himself a has-dean. So welcome. And during your time as the dean, you led the expansion of this building that we're gathered in this evening, of the Medical Education Center and the genetics research floors, and also the expansion of the number of students in the undergraduate medical program. So just tell me what it was like to be involved in those things at the time.
Well, I think things like that only come along once in a lifetime, and it was just a tremendous privilege to work with so many great team players to make this all happen. And it's quite a story. As Ian said, in his tenure, they were through some difficult times and some good times. And when Ian finished, there had been quite a rise in the number of researchers and graduate students in medical school. And in fact, the medical school building was stuffed. It was packed. We couldn't put another researcher in a closet. And we were really confined by the space when I started. We were really confined by the lack of money that Ian alluded to into keeping things up to date. So the building had not been able to have the money to keep it up to date, and that had been noticed by the accreditors, which basically, when I started, the accreditation said, well, a full accreditation could not happen until we renovated the medical education part. So research was blocked for space, and education was crumbling and falling behind because there had been no money. And in fact, when I started, I had to cross the picket line for the first 6 weeks because that huge general strike that was going on involving the nurses and the healthcare system, and there was no communications. Really, everything was shut down. Money was very tight, and so we were pressured by the constraints to do some new building, but no money for it. And the first crack was the message that there's no government money locally unless you can get federal dollars. And a CFI Foundation, CFI, Canadian Foundation for Innovation, came out with a $1 billion fund that you could compete for, and you had to have a medical school hospital partnership. And so the big boys like U of T and McGill and all those were putting in several applications. And we pulled in our best group of people together, led by Pat Parker, to see what we could do. And one realistic questioner, there are many people, in fact, are realistic, that said, well, Dr. Rourke, what are your odds that we would win this competition, get money? And I said, well, about 10%. I said, 10%? You want us to do all this work for 10%? Well, if we don't, we get no chance, right? And so we put it in, and Pat and a whole team of people put in a great application. There were 28 applications, and then they were down to the final 12 or so for adjudication. And then these things always stumble along the way. The final adjudication was in Halifax, and we were socked in here until our team got in at 2 in the morning for a 9 o'clock presentation in Halifax. And in fact, we're successful, which was really exciting, brought in the money for floors 3, 4, 5. So that was going on, and at the same time, it was apparent to so many of us here that the medical school was doing such a fantastic job training great graduates to practice in Newfoundland and Labrador, but the number of graduates it was producing was nowhere close to the number needed to stop relying on the importation of doctors from abroad. And so that was a pressure that became increasingly apparent, and in the middle of this difficult elective time, Ross Wiseman, minister, came to me and, based on the stuff we've been sending him, said, you know, we really need to increase medical school numbers. Can you just cramp it up by 50%? Well, we didn't have enough space here to properly educate the ones we were doing. And so I said, well, I'd love to do that, but unless we get in a building, we can't do that. And so he and I and a number of other people worked for this very diligently over the summer, canceled summer holidays for everybody, and worked on how we do this. And that became one of the 5 things on the election platform by Danny Williams. And Danny Williams came to 5 things platform. One was expand the medical school, so that people from here could get into medical school. Because I observed there were so many fantastic students who would try to get in, and they couldn't get in because the seats were so limited. It was heartbreaking to see all these wonderful, could-be wonderful doctors not able to get in. And this was a way to allow kids from Newfoundland and Labrador to get into medical school. And so that was one of the 5 things in his platform. And when he got elected, you'll remember how tight the time was. They closed the room. They didn't open the rooms delayed the opening of the rooms for a year because there wasn't money to actually operate the rooms at the time. Like, it was really tight economic times. And he remember him saying, well, we promised 5 things in the election. We're going to do them. And one of the 5 things was the medical school expansion. So then we now had a problem of two things on the go at the same time, and it was two side-by-side buildings that were going to be completed about a year separate. It was going to take up all the parking space in future expansion. So a number of people, West Garage, got him hired into it, and a number of people, we came up with the idea if we stacked them, we'd save about $5 million and still save some parking space. And then it went ahead. So, and as Ian and Margaret know, it's not a straight line. So we're just going ahead, and this is just fantastic. I mean, I'm at cloud nine, working with the architects, everything's going ahead, got the whole team working on the project. And then just as we're just about to get it ready to go to tender, 2008, what happened? The global financial crisis hit. The whole world stopped. Everything came to stop. Our project came to stop. It fell off the table just like that cup of coffee, and you see it going down to the floor, and I thought it was gone. And I really looked for all the world to be gone. And then the federal government came out with a stimulus package. You remember the federal government, a few stimulus packages to get the economy going. And the premier they called up and said, Jim, we're going to do some stimulus packages here. No hurry. There's going to be a series of them. First call is due in 2 weeks. But no hurry to get it in. There's many more coming. And so we brought the team together. We said, we've got 24 hours a day. All of us worked around the clock and got that in. And really the only stimulus package that got put to government because nobody else made that first deadline, and there was no other call. So then the project got going, and it got going. And then suddenly we had money, we're going ahead when the whole world stopped. And so the bids came in really good for it. The woodwork here, the woodwork company in Quebec that does the woodwork for the Senate, for the U.S. Senate, for the U.S. Library of Congress, for all the big buildings in North America, called up and said, I've got 100 craftsmen sitting empty here. We want work for them. We don't care what the cost is. We want to put a lowball bid on the woodwork. So we had all sorts of things like that that allowed us to do a fantastic building within a budget that we actually maintained. I think it was a $60 million building. We finished it for $61 million or thereabouts. So it was not a straight line. I'll just tell one more story about that. And then we knew the timeline was pretty much too tight for the first class coming in. So we had 80 students coming in when we only room for 60. But you didn't want to send them back and say, no, you're delayed or you're not getting in. So we squeezed them in every corner. And then it looked like we might miss the second year, which we had no contingency plan for that. And the architects, everybody's wringing their hands, and I finally said, well, I'll go and meet the builder because we got to get it done. So I remember going up, meeting the owner of the building company and saying, he says, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm getting a headache. And I said, oh. So I'm getting a headache because the building's getting delayed, but if we miss our deadline, we're both going to have headaches. Now, do you like headaches? I don't like headaches. And by the end of the conversation, his number one and my number one were meeting every Monday to try to sort it out. We got it done just in time for the second expanded class to come in and avoided that problem. So fascinating experience, many people involved on it, but these things are never a straight line, and you know, from the worst of times to the best of times, it comes around.
Great. So I know that history is something that's very important to you, and I wonder if you might just tell us about your experience in partnering with your wife and partner in commissioning the Crafting a Legacy mural and actually working hands-on with that. What was that like?
Well, that was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I think everyone on the project enjoyed it. But it's interesting how it came about. So we had this big open space here, and Leslie and I were thinking we wanted to commission some piece of art for it. Now, we're pretty naive in the art field. I mean, we're very naive in the art field. So we talked to architects and people who knew the art, and you know, we looked at everything from stained glass to commissioning a sculpture. We came to the realization that you can commission somebody to do your artwork, but once you commission them, they do it the way they want, and it might be something you like, it might be something you don't like, or it might be something you got to put in a closet, or like that famous painting at Memorial. that raises the questions all the time. So we're sort of stuck in that, and we're actually out in British Columbia visiting the British Columbia Museum of Art and History, and Leslie says, "Jim, you've got to see this, I think." Got the answer. And there was a set of mural panels done by an artist, Linda, who was the artist who did those, and she worked with public school students to do dinosaur exhibits on these panels. But Leslie's got a bit more artistic mind than mine, so this could be something that we commissioned the artist to do the work here with medical students and faculty and staff and retired staff, and do it in the history of Newfoundland and Labrador. And so we invited people to join with us, and we'd everybody from medical students to my esteemed colleague on the left, and we get guided through the artwork to do it. And for me, it was a really wonderful experience, because I've got a little pea-sized right side of my brain for doing artistic things, and maybe a bigger left side of my brain for more regular scientific things. And you could almost feel that pea-sized part of your creativity grow as you were working on the clay and that sort of thing. So all in all, it worked out way better than we could dream. And how often you get to dream a dream, and I think Leslie for having a dream that really came true in this. Dream a dream and have it come out way better than you ever dreamed it possible. So, and have fun doing it at the same time. So it was grand.
That's great. Okay, so I think now we'll switch over, and I have some questions that I'm going to ask. And these, I guess, are probably the toughest ones, right? Because this is a lady who currently has the job.
She's in the hot seat now.
Which is why we gave her the special chair.
And I didn't get the
I'm on the middle chair. So now that you've been here at Memorial for the last several months, almost a year now, I wonder if you would just tell me what your overall impression is so far of the faculty and of our province.
So it is a real privilege for me to be the dean here and to be the first woman dean. And it's a really wonderful place to work. I found the students, the staff, and the faculty so committed and passionate about the Faculty of Medicine, as well as helping the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. The other thing that's very unique here is because we're the only medical school actually in the province, we have a special relationship with the people and the politicians, as you mentioned. But also we graduate excellent physicians and healthcare researchers who are really committed to improving the health of people in the province, and we can influence healthcare delivery and look at research questions that are important to the population. From a personal perspective, I come from the mainland, which I understand is sometimes called mainland madness, but I find it much more civilized here. People have a better balance of personal and professional life. I mean, I actually can get home and watch my favorite show, Coronation Street, on time. And I think the other part is I'm learning a new language, right? Because I bought my dictionary at the rooms when I first came here, but I'm now incorporating the jigs and the reels and Captain Barty's favorite word, tangly. So that's really part of my vocabulary, but it has been a wonderful experience, and it's beautiful to come to work every day and see a bit of the hills and a bit of the ocean. Like it's spectacular.
Especially when you can see them.
Yes.
Like this week. So now as you lead the faculty and staff and students through a strategic planning process, which has just gotten underway in the last couple of months, what do you see as the greatest strengths moving forward, and what do you see as our sort of big challenges in the next 5 years?
So I first want to talk about the strategic planning process because I think it emphasizes the strengths that we have in the faculty. So I actually, what's happening here? Thank you. I actually have a steering committee, and people actually had to apply to get on the steering committee. And Carol Ann Walker, who everybody knows, said to me, people are coming up to me, Margaret, and they asked me, is she serious? Does she really want people to apply? And people sent me emails and said, well, if you're really desperate, I'll be on it. But I have to say, I got fantastic applications, and we have some of our committee members are here. We have 20 people on the steering committee. We meet every 6 weeks. We had a survey. We sent it out to 1,000 people and got 357 responses, which again, having been involved in strategic planning before, that's terrific. And we had a nice balance of undergraduate students, graduate students, staff, and faculty, both MD and PhD faculty. We then did focus groups, including some of our standardized patients and community people, as well as students, staff, and faculty. Got 125 people. And I also interviewed key leaders within the school and the university and the community, and that was about 51. So it's been really terrific. The survey, we got 110 pages of comments, and I've read every single comment. So out of that, the strengths are really highly valued education across the spectrum, from undergraduate, postgrad, and graduate. And recently we had an accreditation visit for our continuing professional development. And one of the things that was cited was that we have the best online training in the country, and we need to celebrate those things. We have terrific research in a variety of areas with neurosciences, oncology, genetics, translational medicine, and ethics. One thing I learned about when I came here is that there's about 15 academic bioethicists in the country. We have 4. And we really need to emphasize all those terrific things that we're doing. From a challenge point of view, we've heard about it, it happens to every dean, is how do you expand and grow our programs at the same time recognizing our financial constraints. I think from an educational point of view, we've been, as a strength, leading. We developed an innovative, under Dr. Rourke's leadership, spiral curriculum, but we're the first in the country, I believe, to have entrustable professional activities. So we're well ready to implement competency-based medical education. From a research perspective, we have some challenges because we need some more infrastructure for research, both in the biomedical laboratories as well as supports of helping researchers on the clinical side to be able to do the research. Some of the other challenges are actually getting us to get out of silos within the school. That was written and talked about, that as we've grown, the structure has grown, but maybe we need to reflect on how we can have people working across the programs and units more, and look at our governance structure a little bit differently, because we have grown significantly in the last little while. And I think that, again, we have to change the culture in that people in Newfoundland, I've been told by many people, are very modest people. So don't necessarily celebrate all the terrific things we're doing. And I think we need to sell our stories, so to speak, not only within the school, but in the university, but to our community partners, because we're doing some fantastic things here.
Thank you. So I have another question. If a high school student came up to you today as a dean and said to you, why would he or she consider to start a career in medicine as a physician or a medical researcher and to study here at Memorial, what would you say to them?
Well, I think it's an inspiring place. People are very committed, as I've said before. I think that we have a small enough school that people can get to know their peers, their faculty members, and the staff really closely. But it's big enough that there's lots of opportunities that they can develop research ideas or get involved in educational scholarship, those sorts of things. I think as well we have some terrific researchers who are doing international and outstanding research. They can get involved in that. We are innovative, we're nimble, and because we have that special place in the province, I think we're very fortunate, and we have a wide variety of graduate programs that people can choose from.
Great. So what do you think are some of the key drivers for change that will influence the changes that we anticipate that will happen in the next few years in medical education?
So I think we have to look at the future of academic medicine and health research. And so there's a lot of disruption happening in innovations, and with education we need to look at enhancing some of the educational things that we're doing. So thinking of Generation 2020, which are the students that are born after 1997, they're really tech savvy. So in our classrooms, in our research, we need to be using more social media, virtual patients. We need to look at other ways of assessing people and do more progress testing, and I know that's a passion of Don Mackay's. I think that because of Generation 2020, they have more perspective around global health and global learning experiences, so we need to have a really well-developed strategy around that. They also want to be in the community and have service learning, and I know that we're expanding that. And they like to work together. When I went to medical school, we had little carols, and you didn't possibly talk in a library because you'd be sent out. So we have to look at those kinds of things in the space that we do. The other things are the topics that we need to teach in medical school. So health service delivery, population health, health economics, be ready for competency-based design. And then from a research point of view, really increasing our translational research from bedside to or bench to bedside rather. And also to be looking at how do we engage our community. For example, with our Aboriginal people, we have a unique population of Aboriginal people here that I think there are many things that we can do to work with our communities much more effectively.
So I'm going to take this back for you now, and I'm going to, we still have about 15 minutes, so I'm going to open up for questions now from the audience. And as I said, if I'm going to bring a microphone up there, and if you'd like to come down and identify yourself, and you can ask a question to one of the specific deans, or you can ask a more general question, and then we can look to our panel to decide who wants to answer it. And if they don't pick somebody, I'll pick someone for them. Any questions? Okay. Here comes Gary.
It's a question for all three, and maybe Margaret ask it a different way. You look back on your career and the development of medical school during each of your tenures, and if you had to think about, I should have zigged when I should, and I zagged when I should have zigged, what thing would you have liked to have accomplished during your tenure that maybe eluded you a little bit? And Margaret, what would you like to see that maybe, if you could, you want to get there? Agreed, I guess.
Okay. Dr. Bomer.
Pick on me first, eh? Do I get the microphone?
Right, I have to pass this to you.
Thanks. Well, I think one of the big things that we did was we changed the curriculum, and it was one of the biggest learning experiences of my life. Was all the mistakes that we made when we did it. One of the memories I have was the first class in the new curriculum, and I started our tenures at the same time. And by Christmas, we had two curricula going at the same time. And it was getting very confusing. And I was going out after an exam to my car, and I was surrounded by about 35 very angry medical students who were disgusted with the fact that the exam had not reflected the new curriculum, but had really continued in the old curriculum. And I've talked about it subsequently because I think that had I to live it over again, I would really do things very differently. And I would do them the way that we actually started to do them that Christmas with Tom Scott, and involving the students and really mobilizing the students in terms of how we monitored the introduction of the new curriculum. So that's, I guess, the biggest learning.
Well, I guess I talk about curriculum as well, and I see Desmond Whalens there in the class of 2017, and we were very fortunate with our new curriculum, which was really the spiral curriculum in the first 2 years. that the class was so helpful to us because we knew we couldn't get it right, but there was a lot of effort to try to do as best we could. And their feedback was so helpful, at least ensuring the next class got better go at it. So thanks to the class of 2017 for that. My thing that ran out of time on was extending that new curriculum to the clerkship part of the curriculum and getting in a longitudinal integrated clerkship that could be done in St. John's and throughout the province for every student here, because that to me has become the evidence-driven best way to deliver a clerkship now, and I think I've seen other schools go ahead with that in limited ways, and we have the opportunity here to go ahead with it in a major way for all the students that would meet both the needs of the aspiring specialist and the aspiring family physician. But ran out of runway in that one, so that'll take a few years if that ever goes that way. So I suppose that's over the new dean and the undergrad dean to see whether we can get that far. But that's a stretch that I couldn't get to. But we lots of people interested in that idea. But the curriculum is such a major job redoing it. But we were pretty pleased with the process. I think we learned from the struggles that you folks had, and we had the class with us from the beginning, which was a big help.
So I'm going to start off with my initial vision when I came here, if people ever saw my presentation. So I think we need to transform healthcare through experiential education, world-class research, and exceptional community engagement for Newfoundland and Labrador and beyond. So that was kind of my vision when I came. What does that mean in a real world sense? I think we have so many great things here that we can build on. So I would like to see that Memorial is seen as the place to go to get expert opinion from our researchers and from our educators. And that already happens in areas, but I'd like it to happen more fully. One of the things I learned from one of my mentors, because I'm really big on mentors, is really being able to have people do things beyond what they expect and reach for the stars. And then as a leader, I can bask in the glow of everybody else's accomplishments. And that's what I like to see for the student, staff, and faculty. We have wonderful people here. I think from an education point of view, the longitudinal integrated clerkship, I think, is something that I'm very passionate about leading forward. And we're known for recruiting, for sure, family physicians in rural areas, but I really think we need to look at our expertise in training generalist specialists and to also be doing that in the rural and underserviced areas. I think that from a research point of view, again, we have lots of great areas, but we can expand that and collaborate more with international people. That's already happening, but letting people know that we're Memorial and we have expertise. And I'd like to see much more engagement of our community, and I mean that from the staff, students, and faculty. That's happening, but I think there's a big way to go.
Thank you. Who else would like to come down and ask a question? All right.
Hi there, Catherine at Chair of Family Medicine. I'm struck by a wonderful opportunity here of so many years of experience and success and wisdom. So I figured I would ask each one of you for, say, a pearl for those of us kind of starting out on our careers more. If you had one sort of little bit of advice as to how to get the most from a career here at Mural or wherever our paths would take us.
Okay, we'll go this way now.
So great question. So if I reflect on my career, I had a couple of life-changing things. So if somebody had told me that I would be the dean of the Faculty of Medicine at Memorial when I started my career, I would have said, you're crazy. So what happened with me, I think, is I always tell my students, you have to be passionate about something, you have to have fun, and you have to make a difference. So I go into things thinking those three things and ultimately making a difference. But I think if you're passionate about it, you can move forward. But I've also been very fortunate in my career, and I've had many people who saw my potential, and who actually got me to do things that I wouldn't have thought possible. And so I've been very privileged with mentors like Carol Herbert, who was the second woman dean of medicine in Canada, and Mike Strong, my previous dean, who actually nominated me for a double AMC Council of Dean Fellowship. So I've had lots of opportunities. I'm very grateful for that. But I think always being positive and looking to the future.
Kath, great question. I'm reminded of Lauren Terrell, who was a dean in Alberta, who was going on a career path like this, and then an opportunity came to do duck research that led to a lot of the new retrovirus research in Canada. And his comment was, opportunity knocks, but it doesn't open the door. And so often you're going along some way and there's an opportunity over there, and we just have to be open to that opportunity and then consider it, and if it's the one, embrace it and run in sometimes a different direction than you're going. And so that's one thing I'd say. The other thing I'd echo what Margaret said, which is about the use of mentors and running things past people and the support of other people. None of us, certainly not me, have ever done anything by myself. It's always with a team of people that help me to get to where I'm going. And using that, and I always feel the room's smarter than me, even to make major decisions. So even career decisions, bouncing it off other people, I find is hugely important, especially the ones closest to you, like my spouse or whatever, and you've all got meaningful people as well. But I think that's the being open to the ideas of others, considering those in whatever choice we make, and then run with it.
So much has been said, and I would agree with it all. I think, as a chair or in our positions, if you look back on our careers, they look as though they were on a ladder of some sort, but they're not. There's serendipity along the way. There's people who point you in a direction. And I think one of the things is to keep your mind open, because I always wanted to be in academic medicine. I knew that. I mean, I graduated from McGill, so that was kind of a normal thing to be expected. But I never dreamt that I would do all of the things that I did. And a casual remark by one of my chairs when I was a faculty member said, you're doing pretty well, Ian. You could be a chair of medicine one day. Me? So I think listening to people around, and then when you're actually in the situation where you've been invited or you've applied, don't be frightened to ask for advice. As Jim says, there's lots of talented people around. And when I became dean here, Richard Newman said to me, he was the associate dean of basic science. He said, you're going to make a lot of decisions. He said, I'm going to give you the best advice I can. Don't tell me that you don't want to do it because, it's not a good idea or that it's not been well thought through, because it will be thought through. If it's a political decision, tell me it's a political decision. And I took that advice and I always used it with all the associate deans that I worked with, because there's sometimes when you have to say no. And it's not really because it's not a great idea. It's because politically it's not going to fly at that moment. So I think there's a huge amount of advice around us. And as Jim said, and Margaret, bright people working, you've got people who are committed, and you've got people with passion. And that really makes the whole environment work.
I just can't resist jumping in here 1 sec, because I followed my esteemed colleague here on the left, and he talks about saying no, but I was told when I started that Ian was so skilled at saying no that people didn't actually realize it until about 3 days later. And what big footsteps to follow on. It was a tough job, Ian, to follow you.
That's great. Any last questions from the audience? Oh, yeah. We can take two.
On that topic of pearls, the success of the Faculty of Medicine isn't just within this walls, and it requires partnerships with others. And I'm wondering if each of you would reflect on the most important partners, external partners, that you had, and what were some of the key mechanisms by which you encouraged and allowed that partnership to flourish?
It's another great question, Doug. Jim, it's your turn to start. I'm like the mom here.
I think that's a great question. For me, the partnership with the government and the Healthcare Foundation were absolutely critical. And I was so fortunate when I started when George Tilley was head of the CEO of the Healthcare Corporation, not Healthcare Foundation, Healthcare Corporation, and John Abbott was the deputy minister. And we met every month, and we sat down, we looked at all the problems and figured out how we could collectively put the levers to actually make those work. And it was the most wonderful working experience everywhere because each of us knew the other two had their back covered. A rare thing, I've never encountered that in that level. And then within one day, it was gone. That was when the breast care crisis happened, and both her heads had to roll that same day, and that was the end of that most remarkable thing. Since then, I had, again, very good relationships. So, for example, with Oscar Howell as the VP Medicine for many years, and because our faculty, our staff, and students work in the healthcare, they deliver patients' health all across the province, and so if they've got a problem, we've got a problem. If we've got a problem, they've got a problem. So much is intertwined, and I just found working with such good people there was so essential to success. And the government, you have to work with them, and it's so hard. I was with 13 ministers of health in 13 years, and some were fantastic, and others not so much. And I'll leave it at that. But you do find but no matter who it is, it's our job to find a way to work with them. Not their job to find a way to work with us, but our job to figure there's some way I can figure out how to work with this person. And sometimes it takes a lot of figuring, but I guess that's what I'd say with the critical partners. I mean, there's so many other partners, the community experiences and reaching out, being in the communities, as Ian did, as Margaret's doing, is also just so important to do. But that triumvirate, and for a few years, it was just so tight that it was an incredible privilege to be able to be doing that kind of management.
I couldn't agree more, actually. We had our own little triumvirate as well, with, and you know, you don't say no to Sister Elizabeth easily. And as president of the Healthcare Corp, you know, that was a really positive experience. And just like Jim, during my tenure, it was 5 ministers and 4 deputies. So one of the things that and Memorial is unique in Canada, and I think in North America, in that we get our funding from the Department of Health. So social accountability is right in your face. You know, when the minister when the minister's dealing with a crisis, and the medical school can maybe help, you get a call. You know, so one of the things that we did was, because the medical school was still trying to sell to the cabinet, you know, our value. Every time a new minister was appointed, get a little letter from me saying, you know, congratulations, Minister, and then Penny Moody Corbett, myself, or Richard Newman, and the Tom Scott, and we would all go up to the hill and say, you know, this is what we do, and give them a little education lesson. The other people, though, that I think are really important are the communities around the province, the relationships that you can build. I learned very in a difficult way when we started the units out in the community. Twillingate and Goose Bay were perfect. They were ready to go. But Port aux Basques was a novice at this. And it was a political decision to open up Port aux Basques. We had thought that it was going to be Corner Brook. And the next day I get a call from the mayor saying, can they put MUN's logo on the hospital, and are the residents starting tomorrow, and who's the faculty member going to be? And we had to take 6 months and readjust their expectations, but they got someone like Wendy Graham, who was committed. And I mean, she's still in Port aux Basques leading that group. So it does work, but it was an amazing transformation over 6 months that the mayor actually was ready to receive a whole bunch of people very quickly, but you have to work with the communities.
So I'm going to talk about a different experience, which was involved in my previous life. So for those of you who don't know, I was at the University of Western Ontario, and my role was called the Vice Dean Hospital and Interfaculty Relations. So I liaised with over 20 hospital corporations, including 2 large academic health sciences centers. And we actually led the development of an academic health network called SWAN. So it involved hospitals, which were small, community-based hospitals, rural regional hospitals, the big academic hospitals, as well as 3 universities, the University of Waterloo, Western, University of Windsor, and 3 community colleges. We also worked with the local health integrated networks and community-based networks like the Palliative Care Network in Southwestern Ontario. And we actually developed the vision, we engaged people, we developed a governance structure, and we developed topics that were critical to all of the agencies. And they were related to education, of course, and research, and involving the community. And what we were ultimately trying to do was integrate academia across the clinical environment. And so one of the things that was really important was interprofessional education. So we developed a working group, and we came together with what's the vision and got people from all those institutions to volunteer. Then we had to lobby the different groups and get funding for this, and it wasn't a lot of funding. But ultimately, it was making sure that we had similar vision, that we had similar goal in mind, that we had values that we lived by, and that we learned from each other and we worked as a team. And I think in the province here, because we're small enough, there's that opportunity to develop a provincial academic health network, and kind of building on Jim and Ian is getting out there. I'm going with Dawn and Dr. Revalier, potentially Kath, you don't know it yet, to go around the province and meet with those individuals and the communities, and you've spoken to it. My experience is people love the academics coming into the community. It raises their profile. They feel they're getting better health care. I think there's lots and lots of opportunities, and we've talked about provincial simulation plan, and we've talked to the College of the North Atlantic. And I think, again, enhancing and strengthening our relationship with the regional health authorities. So I think it's being present, saying your perspectives, but also respecting everybody else's opinions and moving towards that joint vision.
Kath, that's an opportunity knocking there, girl.
I'm mindful of the time. It's okay.
Okay, you can ask the question during the.
I'm asking him one can answer. How about that?
Oh, you can. Okay, we will let, because we started at 5 after, so we're still okay.
Okay, real quick. We're all here because of improving healthcare in our province. I'd like just one story that is not about academics, not about research, not about political affiliations and board involvement, rather a patient or a research or a patient that has benefited because of us, or somebody who has benefited from the research that has come out of our institution. A story, an encounter that you would have had, just sort of showing the heartstrings of what we do here.
Okay, who wants to?
We have the person sitting in the audience.
Yes, Jane.
Sorry, Jane.
Yeah?
Jane, you tell us.
You tell a story. Absolutely. Hi.
Hello. As most of you know, I'm a geneticist here, and I started in 1977, and my background was personal blood genetics, which got me very well started for dealing with people. And this idea of serendipity, or be aware of the opportunities, has been absolutely critical first it was in the eye clinic, and people came in, and it was then go out to the rural hospitals to see the rest of the family and put together the whole picture of hereditary eye diseases in the province. And then one day there was a referral at the ocular genetics clinic which said eye, brain, and kidney tumors, please see. This was a family with von Hippel-Lindau disease, a very, very serious condition with with an eye vascular tumor in the eye, but also cerebellar spinal cord. Later, we found they had renal cell carcinoma, they had renal tumors. Many had died very young, and very quickly, Dr. Fulmer was involved because two of the first young women who were there had retinal angiomas that needed treatment inpatient at the time. Therefore, they needed medical consult. Most of the deaths in the family had been from unrecognized pheochromocytomas, and so that we suddenly had a medical situation, not just an eye situation. And within about a month, we had all the physicians relevant in the health sciences, and from pediatrics, we later found our youngest affected patient was a 3-year-old. In the literature, it said in the 20s and 30s. But I reviewed every record, got every bit of family history. What tumors did these people have? What age did they have them? Talked to all of the imaging, biochemistry, and so on people, what tests can find these early. And with, I had a master's degree, so with Dr. Bomer backing me up, we put this screening in place and made a dramatic difference. And it was always going out to see people in their communities, have the clinics there. And that led to the multiple endocrine neoplasias, the hereditary colon cancers. And it was always, what is in this family? What are the red flags that there might be other people that can benefit from the research? Dr. Hagee was one of the surgeons in Gander who did the colonoscopies for many of the big colon cancer families. And when I found some atypical features in the Twillingate colon cancer family, I had to make recommendations to the surgeons because they needed to do colonoscopies for screening, not the sigmoidoscopies that the book said, because our family was different. So learn from all those people, go to every small community, get the family histories, tie the families together, and put new healthcare in place to help the province. And the people in the province have been totally wonderful to participate in all of this.
I think that's a wonderful story, Jane. And, you know, as someone who cares for patients with cancer and sees people at increased risk, it's really changed the story. These have gone from being people who came from a generation where they watched their moms, their sisters develop breast and ovarian cancer and think that it was something that was going to happen to them, to now, through your leadership and a lot of work that was done by you and sitting down and figuring out these stories. I still remember sitting down with you and going through these pedigrees, that now we have a panel of genes, you know, not just 2 of them, but 9. And so now these families have this knowledge. And when I see the patients in the clinic now, what they tell me is that this is incredible because I have what my family never had before. I had knowledge. And that knowledge means that I have the power to change the story, and so they can have prophylactic surgery. So I think that's a wonderful example of you know, how we've made a real difference here at Memorial. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I think that would be a nice way to end. Please don't leave. We're going to have a little gathering outside. I would like to really just take this opportunity when, you know, when I was asked to become involved with the 50th anniversary of the medical school, I was very keen and eager. I was the 20th graduating class just a couple of years ago. And these three people have made a huge impact, as I said earlier, on my life, and I know that I'm only just one small person here in a big university in a big province. So I know what an impact they've had on several people. So, one of the things we talked about in celebrating our 50th anniversary was illuminating the past, which I think we've done a good job of here this evening, and ensuring a bright future. And I know under Margaret's leadership, and with all of the wisdom and the engagement in this room and beyond, that we certainly do have a bright future. I'll probably be a little bit old at the 100th anniversary, but potentially could still be here. I want to thank you guys for coming this evening, and for all of you who are watching us. Yay. I would like to remind you that if you go to www.mun.med.ca/50, you'll find all the other wonderful things happening for the rest of the year. We have 3 more speaker series. The next one is going to be September 14th with Dr. Ed Roberts, and then 2 more after that in November with Dr. Dennis Furlong, who's one of the early graduates from the school, and also with Chief Joe and Catherine Anderson. So, pay attention, look forward to those. The next big event after this is going to be our gala, which is on Friday, September 8th at the Convention Center. So that's our real sort of big party to celebrate the 50th anniversary. And we're going to have an open house on September 24th. So that's when we're going to open our doors to the public, and it should be a great event as well. So thank you all for being here, and thank you again to all of the deans for really just a wonderful evening.